You know, yesterday the census came out and said 1 in 7 Americans are living below the poverty line. Do you look at that story today? You know, you open up your USA Today, right, and you see that story, and you see Washington is debating tax cuts, the tax rates for the wealthy, and you sit there and say, isn't that a disconnect in America right now?
It is a disconnect, Chuck. What we need to be focusing on is growth. How do we create jobs? How do we expand businesses? That needs to be job one right now. And all these other issues involving fairness and things like that can wait. It's a lot easier to be fair and equitable when your economy is growing and incomes are rising than it is when things are stagnant the way they are today. So I think we need to focus on jobs and growth.
What do you think should happen with the tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans? Obviously, the president thinks that they should not be extended because it's too expensive. It would cost $700 billion. A lot of people, including some of your fellow Democrats, say, look, this is no time to raise taxes. And let's face it, effectively, that's how it would feel to folks. Right. It's not going to feel like a tax cut. It's keeping the status quo. And if you let it expire, it feels like the taxes are going up. I mean, where do you come down on this?
Well, it not only would feel like it, they in fact would go up.
Yeah.
So I'm in the second camp, Savannah, for the following reasons, although with a caveat I'll explain. That 2%, those are the people who make the hiring decisions, who make the investing decisions, who account for 30% of consumption. We want them doing more hiring, more investing, and at least hanging in there from a consumption standpoint. Raising their taxes right now, when the economy is this weak, that substantively is not the smart thing to do. But let me just finish. We got a huge deficit problem.
Yeah.
Once the economy is growing more robustly, then we can pivot, and if Democrats agree to restrain spending, then you can look at those rates. But that's how it ought to happen.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because you know that it's a Democratic talking point that those tax rates affect only 2 or 3% of small businesses. You disagree with that?
Well, directly, but those are the people who I said who make the majority of the hiring. They're sitting there, can I afford to hire more people? Do I want to make these investments? And if we just add to their burdens right now, it increases their uncertainty, their anxiety. They're less likely to do the things we want them to do. Hire people, invest, and continue to consume. So now is not the time. If the economy is growing 3-4%, then we can have a debate. But even if I can just make one political point, as Democrats, we should care about the deficit. But just to go out and say our only answer to solving the deficit is just to raise taxes, I think that plays into the Republicans' hands. We need to show that we're for spending restraint too.
And who is saying that? I mean, President Obama does seem to be, he is indicating, look, he has talked about entitlement reform when it wasn't before others.
No one is saying that, Chuck, but on the table right now, that's all we're doing. If we combined allowing these rates to go, this is not the time for it in any event, but if the economy was growing robustly and we combined this with spending restraint, then you've got a case you can make. And that's, as you know, what's driving a lot of the independents. I
have to ask you about the $700 billion, though, because even though the White House likes to say, hey, we have a deficit problem, we don't want to spend the $700 billion on tax cuts, I mean, they are saying that they will spend that revenue on something else. It's not like they're putting it away in the bank and not going to spend it. So, I mean, doesn't that deficit argument kind of fall flat anyway?
Well, I think we ought to lead with spending restraint. People understand that, and then if we get into this debate, and we can get into that question about, is it actually going to go to reduce the deficit or not? And a lot of the people I talk to who would be affected by this, they say, look, I'm patriotic, I want to help the country, I know we have a deficit, but if my taxes go up and it's just going to more spending I don't agree with, well, that's a different equation for them.